Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of Technotopia. So for those not across it, I do overviews on this channel. It's where I have a look at the first 2 hours of a game because that's the Steam refund window. Steam says that you can make up your mind about whether you want to keep a game or not in that time, and broadly speaking, as a rule, I would agree and say 20 hours in, you're probably not going to change your mind about how you felt 2 hours in. So it's a short punchy video, keep it around 10 minutes, broad strokes, info, and then you can make up your mind on your own. What a delightful little game. Not a lot of fanfare around this, but it did jump out at me. As you can see, it has a very unique Art Deco sort of art style. That alone had me curious. But if you have a look at that grid-based building that's going on there, I was getting vibes from something like Industries of Titan, a wonderful game that the developer shot themselves in the foot, but I digress. Another thing as well at a blush is you can see that some of these like little building plots are like built into the, I'm using my hands, into that sort of 2.5D space, into the layering depth of the, I don't know what you'd call it, like the Z-axis of the isometric layout. And I've commented on that before in previous games. Alien Dark Descent comes to mind actually. There'll be areas you can't necessarily interact with them, but you can sort of see down into the world and it adds depth of field to the design. Anyway, these are just some weird aesthetic things that jumped out at me and made me give this game a go. Other than that, I went in blind. And I can confidently say this might be my favorite tile placement, just one more turn type games ever. I didn't really realize it because I didn't look at it super hard that that's what it was going in. But yeah, it is something similar to Dwarf Romantic might be the biggest one. The Terrascape, I don't think I've even put that on the channel. But they all come from, you know, that sort of Carcassonne background. Oh, Preserve, there's one I really enjoyed that we covered recently. So I like these sort of lighter games, but while I recognize they can really grab someone, I've never really been grabbed by one until this time. And it's got to do with the meta layer, which I'll tell you what, let's put a bookmark on that. I'll just give you a broad strokes before it gets away from me. So yeah, it's tile placement. You have like a deck of cards and each of them kind of represent, especially in the early going, essentially a faction aligned single square, you know, one by one, I guess you could call it. But as you progress and you build out your deck during the course of a run, there will be other ones more odd shaped or larger. You know, 1x2s start to come in fairly early, but it'll belong to one color, which is a sphere of influence in the utopic city of Technotopia, in which you play as like a sort of AI that's governing the city building and zoning of it, right? That's what you're doing in game. And I believe the classes are like government, something like nobility, commerce based, you know, the money men, and then the people. I'm not getting the names right, but it gives you an idea. They're the broad spheres that you're working with. And I suppose like mechanically at its base, you have like a turn counter at the top. Every 10 turns, it'll sort of finish a cycle. And at that case, you'll have to pay the income to maintain each of these areas of influence. You can see up the top right corner, you've kind of got your kitty of points that you've accrued, and you've got the tax that you're going to have to pay at tick 10. Pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. And so you start thinking, all right, well, I need to place this tile instead of that tile to generate income. You know, at its base level, I think you get like 10 or 20 points or something like that when you place a tile. Like you place a red tile, you get 20 red points, it gets added into the total, and then you'll have to, you know, pay essentially the maintenance expenses at the end of the 10 rounds. A cool wrinkle on top of that, and you might see it, I think it's down the bottom left, or you can even just see the way it's playing out. There are 4 Tetris-like shapes, I suppose you could call them. They're the touchstone that jumped out at me immediately. And while they are color-coded in their descriptor, that is to say, if you match any like color to that shape, it will generate extra points into that sphere of influence. So for example, going on the red guys, the people's influence, they kind of want a cube, a 2x2. But if I were to make that 2x2 cube out of, I don't know, green buildings, as long as they're all the same color and I make the 2x2, that'll cash in. When I place the final green block, I'll get the green money, but I'll also get a red bonus for making that shape, and it auto forms when you complete it. Now that's just basically how it works at the moving parts at the entry level, and that in itself is clever. and addicting enough to kind of keep you hooked. Funnily enough, for something that is just tile placement, I suppose parading as city planning and zoning, it's kind of the most rigorous city planning experience I've had in a long time. I'm really thinking, all right, well, we've got that solo, yellow block over there, and I don't want to forget about it. And okay, and you sort of, I am using my hands, but you're doing that in your mind. You're looking at, all right, I'm going to create that little dog leg shape there, so don't build there, and then I want to build, okay, cool. You're trying to get the most efficiency you possibly can as you roll with the punches of the cards coming out. So this fits the genre so much better than most. One of the really cool wrinkles to it is that I suppose it's on a 10-turn cycle, but it's at 5 turns. There's like a pip in the middle of the turn counter. So you've got a 10-turn cycle. At the end at 10, you pay the tax. In the middle at 5, you get an event. And these events are so cool because I kind of hate narrative storytelling in a lot of mainstream video games. There, I've said it, because all they're doing is trying to emulate Hollywood or book narratives or all these other mediums that have their own narrative structure because it's apparent in the structure. Video game narratives shouldn't be trying to pretend to be a movie. They should be something that relishes in the fact that you can interface with the game. But I digress. So what ends up happening is it'll spit out a little choose your own adventure event. What's an example off the top of the head? Because there's so many of them and they're so branching and they add so much life to your little city. Okay, so there's a dude who breaks into a museum and steals a painting. That's because his sick child needs surgery or something like that. Whatever, it's on the nose, it's interesting. And it gives you a couple of options of how to play it, right? And you can just dismiss him outright or bad luck, lock him up. Maybe you can sort of bring the media in to play it out. It'll give you 3 choices. And at first blush, like they'll have a color code, they will be overt, and what they will do is potentially increase or decrease that cycle tax that you have to pay. So it's pretty important, but it is kind of a little bit chaotic and narrative heavy. So in that instance, let's say you excuse him, you'll get like a feedback loop. I can't remember the specifics of it, but it'll be something like, the people respond well to this, that the dude's innocent or whatever. And so the maintenance costs of the people's tax, or whatever you want to call it, goes down. However, incrementally, what will continue to happen is that's not the end of that event. It will pop up over and over again, having developments of sort of kick-on consequential events. Now, yeah, it's all pre-scripted, I suppose. You picked your poison and it's kind of slowly eking out the poison onto you. But, in a front end, from an immersion and world-building perspective, it's really clever. So then what happens at some point along the chain, you start to have a bit of a situation where people are breaking into art museums at a higher incident because you've set a legal precedent that they could potentially get excused if they have a reasonable excuse. And this in turn will start messing with those numbers as well. Like in that instance, I think the city governance cost goes up on the tax cycle because they're having to implement more security measures to protect art museums because you're having this almost outbreak level of theft from art museums to pay for surgeries. And then even in that particular thread, it continues on, an art exhibition gets announced and it's to celebrate theft or something like that. I can't remember. Like it's an art idea of, stolen art is the theme of the art, like very meta. And then I think someone's high art piece called Pile of Garbage gets thrown out because the cleaners didn't realize, and then that turns into a narrative event as well. And it's a bit tongue in cheek, taking the piss a little bit there. But that's just one event, and you will have multiple at any given time just ticking away. Things from, companies trying to zone out a citizen and he's trying to stand his ground against the company. Now, you can choose which side of the fence you sit on that. A monorail system gets established, but you can even go the wildcard route and use it for smuggling, and the mafia gets involved. And geez, there was a mafia line actually where I kind of empowered them so much that they I think they killed a detective who turned up dead, and then I lent into it and like armed the stepbrother of the detective. The city needs a hero was the prompt or whatever. And it's like, well, I just gave a gun cache and the location of all the mafia bosses to these civilian vigilantes. And then all of a sudden, mafia bosses started rolling up on the streets dead. And coupled with all of this is the cards getting fed back into your deck. You know, all these little events have these actual tangible consequences. I think there's a traffic jam one, and you can widen roads, and that starts adding highways into your deck as well. So it's just really cool, and it made me give a crap about my city. And eventually you're going to run out and then restart. And look, I'm already running this video a little bit long, but the thing that really kept me hooked is there is a narrative, you know, as surface level as it is, it's not Oscar-worthy writing or anything like that, but it's good enough, where you're essentially trying to politic a little bit with the different heads of the city. And in order to progress these story-based missions, you know, in a genre that explicitly just is not something that you put stories in, there'll be like you need to meet with bloody Frank Building Man. And his icon will be out off to the east, a couple of blocks away, and you have to build out onto his icon, and by doing that you will progress the story and have a conversation with him. Maybe he wants you to build certain things. One of the most recent things that I just had, I'm talking to like a maintenance chick, and the city underworks needs to be built in order to deal with utilities issues. So it puts this building in the map like a large structure, and what you have to do is fill in the gaps around the edge of it so as to pass that mission. So it gives you these long-term campaign threads that you're chipping away at, whilst also trying to maintain your city and not let it blow up when you have to pay the tax man at the end of a cycle. It's brilliant from a gameplay design perspective, and that's not even to mention, you know, how wonderful the art style is. The music is fitting, and just generally speaking, this is a very clean and incredibly deceptively innovative entry into this genre. Anyway, I can't sing the praises high enough. I'm so glad I took the time, because this nearly snuck past me. It's coming out in another day or something like that, so check it out yourself. Otherwise, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.